Hello there and welcome to a brand new lesson. This is Happy Beyond Numbers, where we learn maths the easy way. In this lesson, we are looking at the types of relation. We'll focus on classifying relations. Here are our lesson objectives. Without much ado, let's quickly look into these. So to start off, what do we mean by the types of relations, or what brings about the various types of relation? Now, how the elements of the domain are connected to elements of the codomain bring about the types of what relations. And based on that, we would focus on how many arrows. Are there just one arrow linking one element in the domain to the other, or are there many of them? And then we would also look at the direction of the mapping. So with that said, we'll look at our first type of relation we call a one-to-one relation. So when we talk of one-to-one relation, as you can see here, it says it is the type of relation in which each element in the domain is related to only one. The emphasis here is only one. So each element in the domain is related to only one element in the codomain. So if you take different elements in the domain, it is also related to different elements in the codomain. 1:1. There is no element in the domain that will have two elements in the codomain. No. And there is no element in the codomain that maps to two elements or more elements in the domain. That is a one-to-one relationship. In real world example, you realize that each and every individual have a unique identity number, or a unique social security number, or a unique passport number. There are no two people that share the same identity numbers, even if they are twins. No. Mathematically, if I'm to take these two sets, and then we have a relation that maps 1 all the way to 2. It maps 2 all the way to 4, and then it also maps 3 to 6. You realize that each and every element in the domain is mapped to just one element in the codomain. And each element in the codomain is also mapped to just one in the domain. We say this is one-to-one. That is what one-to-one means. On the other hand, we have other relations, or we have another type of relation we call the one-to-many. For this one-to-many, it says one element in the domain is related to more than one. So if you take the domain, you are mapping it to more than one element in the codomain, and that is what we call one-to-many. So one from the domain is mapping to many elements in the codomain. There are so many examples we can take. So let's define a function where the domain maps to the codomain with a function y squared. So that is the one-to-many relations, and there are many examples, and there are many real life examples we can look at. For instance, a mother having many children, a mother having many children. You see, so with that, there is just one mother in the domain, and she has more than one children. Then a teacher having many students. Mathematically, you can say the square root of perfect squares. So if we take this as an example, and the rule relating set A to set B, or the domain to the codomain, is the square root, then we can say the square root of 4 is 2, right? And the square root of 4 is also a negative 2, because the square root of a number, we have 2 squared gives us 4. Negative 2 squared also gives us 4. The square root of a number always comes in twos. And depending on what we have in our codomain, both 2 and the negative 2 satisfy it. The square root of 100 is 10. It can be negative 10 as well, but depending on what we have in our codomain, we just have the 10. For 9 as well, the square root is what? 3. So you realize that there is an element here in the domain that maps to many elements in the codomain. And this is an example of one element to many relation. Now, talking of the many to one relation, we can say it is the opposite of the one to many. So 2 or more elements in the domain this time around are related to one element in the codomain. If you come to a country, there are so many citizens of the country, and yet they are all citizens of one country. So many people to one country, many students in one classroom. You see, and mathematically, looking at what we did over here, it's inverse. If you take 2, 8 squared is 4. If you take negative 2, 8 squared is also 4. There are many numbers all mapped to the same. And that is what we call the many to one relation. So if I'm to pick this same example, looking at what we have here, our domain this time around has 2, 10, negative 2, and 3. Now, the square, this time around, our relation is the square, not square root. So the square of 2 is then going to be what? 4. The square of 10 is 100. The square of negative 2 is also 4. And then the square of 3 is also what? 9. So you realize that from the domain, we have many elements mapping to just one in the codomain. Many elements. You look at the arrows. There are so many arrows, or let's say in this case, there are 2 arrows mapping to just one element in the codomain. And that is what we call the many to one. Now, the last type we'll be looking at is the many to many. And I believe if you were really paying attention, you should be able to define the many to many on your own. You can pause at this point and define it on your own. So you come back later, we'll do that together. So talking of the many to many relations, many to many relations simply means there are many elements in the domain that are related to many elements in the codomain. It is like a web connection. There is no particular order. One can map to many. So it's like the domain elements are mapped to many elements in the codomain, and the codomain elements are also being mapped by many elements in the domain. This is an arrow diagram that will represent that. So as you see, the A we have here is mapped to many elements. It could be 2, it could be 3. As far as it is more than 1, we can say there are many. B is also mapped to many elements. All these you have here are mapped to many. You realize that the E you have here is also mapped by many. So it's mapped by A and it's also mapped by D. F is also mapped by A and also mapped by B. So all the elements here have more than one from the domain being mapped to them. And the elements in the domain are also being mapped to more than one element in the codomain. This is what we call the many to many relation. So these are the types of relations. It is important that you take note of the difference between one to many and many to one. You look at the arrows. So when the arrows from the domain points, so when one element from the domain has an arrow that points to many, that is when it becomes a one to many. But then when many in the domain maps to just one in the codomain, that is where we say it's many to one. In our next lesson, we'll be looking at what functions are. Functions are just a build up on relations, and you'd realize that not all relations are functions. We'll end this lesson here and continue in a subsequent lesson. Let's have beyond numbers, and if there's any issue of concern, you can always let me know at the comment section. If this is your first time on this channel and you think it will be of help to you, you can choose to subscribe if you so do wish, so that anytime I release a video, you'll be notified as well. See you in our next lesson, and bye for now.